blended day. That's what we called it. It was the day that I wasn't giving them direct instruction for 25% or one day. The second semester, we went up to the 50% mark, but still in the classroom, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the second semester, we were separated. We were in different places. They had the freedom to choose their workspace. We have a learning commons. We have plenty of other spaces in our building where they could work, or if they were choosing to do this outside of the 8 to 3 time frame, they could do that as well. But ideally, we wanted to consider this blending to get to the 50% mark, where they were 50% direct with the teacher and 50% on their own. So this is just sort of an ideal of how this would work. The first class day, I'm introducing topics, providing some key vocabulary, maybe doing a what do you already know, what are we going to know, and the vehicles that we're going to use to get to that target point. So that would be day one together. Day two, a blended day where there's a web quest or a key activity that helps break apart some of the concepts and begin to connect to what we previously did and to look forward to what the expectations are at the end of the unit. The next in-class day would be coming back together, looking at what we learned, measuring it against a rubric, or maybe at that point creating a rubric as a class for how we will measure learning at the end of the unit again. Day four, we're continuing some of the work, the independent projects or the collaborative projects. If you're working on a collaborative project, chances are the group will have to report back to the whole group. And so there was opportunity there to talk to them about tasks and roles in a group, who is going to moderate, who's going to research, who's going to collate, who's going to attribute the sources, to me to give them some of that guidance. And then
go on. No, finish.
I was just going to say, and then the last day would be an assessment day, group discussion day, time for reflection. Sometimes this would take 2 days, especially if we were using a period to do an essay, which I wanted to do. Essays would take up the class period, and then we would have the next day to review.
So just looking at this, Debbie, how much of this was new stuff that you had to create before you embarked on this? The web quests, were they just transformations of previous assessments and the other stuff? I mean, well, how much of this had, in terms, if you were to put a percentage on it, right, roughly, what would the answer be to that question?
I would say at least half, and the reason being is I typically do not create new multiple choice questions. I use databases of questions that have either been recycled from other teachers or from the AP released exams, and those are the questions. And we also used a study guide, a purchase study guide for the students. So I'm not creating that sort of material that students might be working with. But if there's a topic that is frequently part of an essay question on an AP exam, or based on listservs that I belong to, or chat groups with other AP teachers, that's what I would build the web quest around. So a common theme or a content area that needs to be covered really well, and then I would develop a web quest on that. But the wonderful and helpful thing about that is there's so much available to teachers who teach AP right now. There's so many sources that have been digitized, and it just doesn't take long to pull some of that together. So I would probably continue to tweak them over the summer, but the web quest, I created all of them. But once you do one or two, you can recycle it the next year, just tweak it. So again, as 2- and 3-year points came along, I was collecting quite a bit of resources for myself. It's hard in the first year.
And what about the amount of asynchronous content that you actually recorded yourself that was new? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Quite a bit. The asynchronous content, well, no, I'll take that back. Students had opportunities to draw from those vocabulary words and could go off on their own with those. Ideally, they're not repeating each other. So I might present the group with 15, 20 content area terms, big themes. And then they could venture off into those areas on their own. So I'm not really creating what they're doing with it, but I'm giving them guidelines that you need to come back and be able to present to the group a who, what, where, when, and why this is important. And also, I would like for you to connect it to something else that's being done with your peers. And so that's not me creating material, but that is at least giving them some sort of framework. Here's a topic, and I want you to go to it in this format. What sources you use are up to you, and how you present it. If you want to do a flyer, if you want to do a lecture, if you want to do an iBook, a PowerPoint, those can be your choices, and give you time in class to present. So that does cut back on my teacher work, but I just have to make sure that they're not going too far off the reservation on that.
Got it. Got it. Perfect. Keep going.
Okay. And then lastly, I really do believe that in the 21st century, our students, preparing them for the workforce, preparing them for college, isn't about the entry. It's not about the getting into college or getting a job. It's the success that I want them to enjoy once they're there. I know that these students have the ability to go far. And so I want to make sure that I'm promoting that idea of success in college, success in your chosen career field. So this blended program sort of lets me share with them that I have confidence in you, that I can embrace your knowledge, I can embrace your ability to make some of these learning decisions on your own. And to me, that's why this works. This is why this is a good format for the classroom, and especially for AP instruction.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that. And here we have our first question. So you have done this within a traditional schedule. Do you think that change in the school schedule would enhance your strategy?
I do. I believe that a school schedule that could be a little more open to perhaps a student doing this with multiple courses might be easier. For mine, I was the only one who was blending, especially in the first couple of years. And so it was quite contrary to what others were doing. And so students, it was confusing to their schedule sometimes, showing up at the wrong time or showing up on a day that was blended. So I do believe that if we had the openness to blend multiple courses, or even have students have the choice of everything being blended, that would be quite extraordinary.
Right. And how long? What about class period length? Would that factor into the equation?
I honestly think an hour and a half would be ideal. Our course, we're slated for an hour. It did not always seem like enough time, especially when you're prepping for an essay and you want to give the full hour for it and then have time to either submit it in a certain format or go print it if the students prefer to do that. So an hour and a half would be great, but an hour was doable. An hour was doable. That's what we have.
Okay. Here's another one. How has this changed you as a teacher?
I don't want to be using cliches, but it changes you from being a sage on the stage to someone who's more of a facilitator. It feels right. It feels, I connect better with my students. It does foster deeper relationships, and you're able to go around the classroom, move around more, the students move around more. It's a laboratory. Laboratories that we might have thought just belong on the science wing belong in the history wing as well, and it's just exciting. I have to say that as someone who likes to plan out almost every hour of my day, I had to turn loose of that mindset and let there be far more flexibility. And I think that's a better way to address teenagers anyway, that they come to the classroom with their own life struggles and their own academic struggles, and being a facilitator allows me to be more attuned to what they're bringing to the experience, what else is going on in the building at the time, and how is that interrupting or facilitating learning in the classroom. So lots of secondary issues about high school learners can be addressed when you are in a blended scenario, because no one's expecting you just to be at the front of the classroom ready to go. I'm actually, my administrator came by one day and couldn't find me in the classroom and was certain that I was out, but I was actually sitting